The flat country east of Peterborough looks harmless until the fog comes. That night it sat low over the fawn like will dragged through water, swallowing verges and turning ditches into dark, breathing lines. My headlights found the studs and nothing else. Beyond them, pylons rose and vanished, and somewhere far off a dog barked once in a voice that carried for miles. I was meant to meet Carl at a lay-by near a sluice called 40 Foot. He'd rung the paper twice, swearing he had proof of illegal dumping. My editor didn't trust him but wanted a photograph of something. Barrels, pipes, men in high vis. "It's only Cambridgeshire," she said. "If you get lost, follow a drain and you'll find somebody's tractor." I brought a cheap tripod, a thermos, and a fluorescent waistcoat from the office cupboard that smelled of old tea. The sat-nav gave up 20 minutes from the A47. The road narrowed to a strip of tarmac between black water and rushes. The fog thickened until it felt like a room I'd shut myself inside. When the engine idled, I could hear moisture pattering on the bonnet like slow applause. I crept forward past signs with old, peculiar names: Walpole St. Andrew, Guyherne, 16-foot bank, measured by someone with wet boots and a rope. The lay-by showed as a bulge of gravel. There was no other car, only a concrete post with a faded Environment Agency sticker warning about operational plant. I parked facing back the way I'd come, window cracked, the air smelling of mud and something metallic. Time stretched. I poured tea. The radio hissed with a phone-in about hauntings. A caller described a dog, as big as a calf, pacing her car across the marsh. The host half believed her. Headlights slid out of the fog and stopped behind me. My mirrors filled with white. The other car's engine kept running, a diesel knock that made the glass tremble. I stepped out with the tripod as if that made me a professional and not someone on a bad idea. The fog touched my face, cold and oily. "Carl," I called. A door opened and closed. Footsteps on gravel. The diesel idled. "You're late," a man said. He sounded tired. I couldn't see more than a silhouette 3 paces away, coat collar up, wool hat down. He was shorter than I expected. "I'm Tom. From the Herald." "Yeah." He sniffed. "Keep your lights off. They see you, we're done." "Who's they?" He didn't answer. He tipped his head to listen, then gestured. We left the cars running and walked across the verge to a metal gate. The field beyond was short grass and bumps. I could hear water moving somewhere close, not flowing but shifting, like a tide turning in a bowl. "I thought you said a sluice?" "Other side of the bank." He worried the chain and the gate clicked. "You want the story or not?" We went single file up the bank. The fog got brighter and then darker as it caught and released the glow from the car park. At the top, the ground fell away into a straight-cut drain 20 meters across. Black water barely moved. On the far side, a figure stood on the bank watching us, too still to be casual. "Who's that?" I whispered. Carl breathed out through his nose. "Just keep walking," he said. "Don't stop and don't look like you're measuring anything." I looked anyway. Whoever it was had a dog beside them. When we reached the bottom and the concrete spillway, the dog's eyes shone, human. Up close, the sluice looked newer than the drain, a concrete throat with black water stalled at its teeth. A thin orange bulb glowed behind a grating, the kind you see at level crossings. It painted Carl's cheeks a sick color when he crouched. "They open it at 3, he said. "Less traffic. Less eyes." I set the tripod low and pretended to adjust a lens cap I'd lost in April. "Who opens it?" "Not the agency." He tipped his head along the bank. "Come on." We walked beneath the bank toward a corrugated shed with tires on the roof. A pump thudded inside, steady as a heartbeat. The far figure and its dog hadn't moved, but you feel when you're being watched. Carl kept his head down and his hands in his pockets. He moved like a sight worker, quick feet, shoulders tight from years of lifting wrong. He stopped at a rusted pipe that came from under the shed. Its end disappeared in reeds, but the smell was obvious now. Solvent and something sweet, the headache kind. In the fog it rose and hung like a second river. "They do it into the recirculation," Carl said. "Crack the slab, feed a flexible through, let the pump do the rest. If you test out here it's fine. Because it's out here they test, and in there they dump." "Who's they?" I asked again. He tilted his head toward the figure up on the bank. "That's one of them." My voice jumped. "He's a watcher. They send them when they shift drums. Keeps lads like you from getting nosy." "I'm not a lad." "You are at night." The pump beat on. I breathed through my mouth. In the glow the reeds looked lacquered. I wanted a picture that proved anything. The lens fogged. I wiped it with my sleeve. Behind the grating, a shadow moved, as if someone inside had brushed the light and then stopped. "Did you see?" Carl shook his head. "Don't point. If we're lucky, they don't know who you are." "Lucky how?" "If they know your name, it's a knock on the editor's door. If they don't, it's a shove into the drain by men who once played rugby." The figure on the bank whistled. 2 notes, cheerful and wrong. The dog answered with something too low to be a bark. It pressed against the figure's leg without lifting its head. Carl took my sleeve. Back to the cars. Slowly. The fog made time sticky. Open ground behind, water right, shed left as we eased away. The orange bulb faded. The whistle came again, nearer, and there were footsteps sliding down the far bank, stones and boot scrapes. We reached the verge. Our engines idled like patient animals. My car's interior light bloomed when I opened the door. It lit Carl's face, older than I'd thought, clay-cracked lines, pink-rimmed eyes, one ear scarred. "Don't follow me," he said. "I'll ring you tomorrow from a box." "There aren't boxes," I said. He almost smiled. "Exactly." He turned. Behind him, the fog unpacked a shadow that became the figure and the dog. The dog's head came to my hip, but its back seemed too long, its ribs too flexible. It kept its eyes on my open door. The figure's coat had that county issue look, warm, cheap, in bulk. He said nothing, only breathed. Then he lifted a small torch. He clicked it on and off twice, circled it across the verge, and the pump in the shed stopped dead. The fog seemed to lean in and listen. I drove until the fog thinned and Hedges returned. At a roundabout by a petrol station, I sat with both hands on the wheel while a man in a hoodie scrubbed his windscreen, looking everywhere but at me. The radio had moved on to potholes. I turned it off and listened to the idle. Home felt borrowed, like someone else's hotel room. I left my boots on the mat and set the camera down. The card held 14 pictures. Fog, reeds, a smear of orange, Carl's shoulder as he turned. Nothing publishable. I wrote notes anyway. Times, directions, uncertain words. Sleep came shallow. Morning made the fawn look reasonable beneath a grey sky. I bought a paper and nearly paid for a lottery ticket before remembering I didn't have the pound. Page 3. An arrest near Wisbeach. Hair coursers, a transit full of dogs, bolt cutters, cash. I folded the paper. Carl didn't ring. By 11 I called back. Voicemail. I left a message about photos and proof and how we could protect his identity. It sounded like a promise I had no right to make. At lunch my editor asked if I'd been blown into the North Sea. I said I had something, not sure yet. She gave me until Friday. I returned with an Ordnance Survey map, the waterproof kind we kept. The names in that blue and green print were old ones. Bevil's Leam, Counter Drain, Popham's O, as if the land remembered every cut. I drove B-roads, parked by churches too wide for their villages, and walked banks while dog walkers avoided my eyes. Birds rose in ragged clouds and settled again. The wind smelled of earth and bleach. At 40 foot the shed sat quiet. No orange bulb. No watchers. I stood on the bank feeling conspicuous with a camera pointing at nothing. A white pickup rolled past and stopped. The driver lowered her window. She wore a fleece with a logo. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "Just looking. You'll want to stay off the slopes. They're soft after rain. I'll keep to the top." She studied me, then the drain. "You can't see much from here," she said lightly. "You'd need a boat." She smiled and drove on. In the shop a man in a flat cap told me they'd warned people about the dog for years. "Not a ghost," he said. "A rorty old thing keeps to the dikes. Eyes like torches. Belongs to nobody." When I asked where it came from he shrugged once. "Fawn," he said, as if the land itself could breed a dog. On the church notice board a laminated sheet asked for bell ringers and gave a flood number. The vicar came out with a bucket and asked if I needed directions. When I mentioned the sluice, she watched my mouth make the word and then looked past me at fields. "It's quiet," she said, "until it isn't." By dusk the mist began again, thin at first, then dragging at the grass. I parked farther away and walked in on the track by torchlight, my boots finding ruts by habit. The pump started while I was still a field off, the same steady thud. Voices bent and straightened in the heavy fog. I switched off the torch and crouched, counting my breaths. A shape crossed the track, 2 men pushing a blue drum on a sack barrow, one hand on top to steady it. The drum had a red diamond sticker I couldn't read. They angled it toward the shed, boots careful, like a ritual, and behind them, padding without sound, came the dog. Slowly. The men halted at the shed. One knocked twice. The pump changed, then settled. I belly-crawled across the track and propped the camera on my bag. The viewfinder showed fog, a blue drum, the dark box, shapes moving. A padlock clattered. The door opened, spilling yellow. A plastic table, a kettle, blue roll, a thick hose. The light narrowed and the men rolled the drum through, one hand on top. The dog stopped at the light's edge, square and low. Its chest worked with no sound. When a man glanced back, it didn't look at him. It looked to me. My boot scraped a flint. The dog's head snapped. It slid forward. I made myself smaller. Up close its fur was rope-harsh, its eyes pale. It lowered its head to scent. Teeth showed, yellow and square. It made a hinge sound. Behind it a voice said, "Leave it." The dog lifted its head. The voice came again, closer. "Leave it." Boots in the fog. I slid a hand toward the camera. The dog put a paw on my wrist, gently, like a nurse. Another voice came behind me, cigarette breath close. "He's the Herald lad." Fingers took the camera and unzipped the bag. The dog's paw stayed. "We haven't got time," the first man said. They didn't hit or threaten me. They put the camera back, then took the card and slid it into a pocket. "If you had sense, you'd go home," Mint Breath said. "Where's Carl?" I asked. Silence. "Gone," the first man said. "Walked off." The dog removed its paw. The men drifted back. The door shut. The pump shifted key. I pushed up and felt the bank tilt. Clay slumped. I went down. Cold water rose. I grabbed reeds and got cut grass. The bag pulled me sideways. Mud went down my collar. Above me, the dog stood at the edge, quiet, head low. It took my sleeve in a grip and leaned back with steady pressure, as if practiced. The sleeve tore, and I slid up enough to find a foothold. Behind me something heavy struck the water and took a long time to stop moving. When I looked back, the shed door was shut. The pump ran. There were no men. The dog dropped the torn sleeve and stepped back. It turned and walked a few paces up the bank, looking back to check I was following, then padded along the top with that odd, low gait. When I stumbled, it stopped and waited. At the road edge it sat, as if keeping watch, until I crossed the verge. Only then did it melt sideways into the fog, leaving no sound at all. I walked out soaked and cold. In the lay-by, a strip of card lay under my wiper. It was blank. The agency came 2 days later. They found nothing to charge. The shed belonged to nobody. The company's dissolved. The land leased to a trust with a P.O. box. Carl didn't ring. The police logged a missing person report and said he'd had debts. I wrote what I could verify. It ran on page 7. The editor moved me to a school fair piece in the dark. At night I woke to solvent and animal breath. I told myself I'd spooked myself with old stories and men who knew the drains. A week later, cleaning the car, I shook out the boot mat. A curve of dried fen clay fell free. Set into it, neat as a stamp, was the print of a paw. I pressed it with my thumb until it broke.